When worlds converged, consciousness returned to Liam gradually, like tide washing over shore. He became aware first of sensation, the feeling of cool marble beneath his fingertips. Then the sound of waves, though somehow different than before, as if each crash contained echoes of 1,000 oceans breaking on 1,000 shores simultaneously. When he opened his eyes, he found himself still in his lighthouse studio, but transformed. The walls remained, but now appeared semi-transparent, occasionally rippling like the surface of water. Beyond them, he could see not just the familiar coastline of Meridian Bay, but overlaid upon it the crystalline spires of Vera's world, both realities coexisting in the same space. "Vera," he called, his voice sounding strange to his own ears, as if it carried additional harmonics. Here came her reply from behind him. He turned to find her standing by the window, her appearance both familiar and transformed. Her body remained largely as he remembered, but her skin now permanently held that subtle purple luminescence, and tiny motes of light occasionally detached from her outline before being reabsorbed. "Did we?" he began. "Succeed?" She smiled, and the expression sent ripples of light cascading across the room. "Yes and no. We've created something, but I don't think it's exactly what the legends described." Liam walked to join her at the window, noticing that his own movements left faint trails in the air, as if parts of him existed in multiple positions simultaneously. Outside, he could see people moving about on the streets of Meridian Bay, but they appeared slightly transparent, and none seemed to notice the lighthouse. "They can't see us, can they?" Vera shook her head. "We exist adjacent to normal reality, now not fully in your world or mine, but in a pocket dimension between them. We can observe both, but interact with neither. So we're ghosts." The thought brought unexpected pain. His art had been his connection to the world. The idea that no one would ever see his work again struck him deeply. "Not exactly." Vera took his hand, and the contact sent pleasant pulses of energy up his arm. "Watch." She led him downstairs and out the lighthouse door. The sensation of moving through this altered reality was disorienting. Distances seemed both compressed and expanded simultaneously. As if space itself had become relative rather than absolute, they approached a young woman sketching on the beach, an artist capturing the lighthouse from a distance. As they drew near, Liam realized with shock that she was drawing not just the lighthouse, but them as well, though her eyes never focused directly on their forms. "She can't consciously see us," Vera explained, "but we exist as impression, as inspiration. The creative part of her mind perceives us, even if her conscious awareness doesn't." Over the following days, they explored the boundaries of their new existence. They discovered they could travel anywhere in either world, simply by focusing their intention, appearing instantaneously wherever they wished to be. Time moved differently for them now. They could spend what felt like weeks exploring a single moment, or watch centuries pass in what seemed like hours, if they chose. Most importantly, they found they weren't completely cut off from influencing reality. Artists, in particular, seemed receptive to their presence. When they lingered near creative people, those individuals would suddenly find themselves filled with inspiration, often creating works that somehow captured aspects of Liam and Vera's story without realizing the source. 1 month after their transformation, they returned to the gallery where Liam's exhibition had been. His sculptures remained on display, now regarded as his final works before his mysterious disappearance following opening night. The pieces had taken on almost mythical status, with visitors reporting strange sensations when standing near them, feelings of time slowing, emotions not their own washing over them. They become part of the art itself, Liam realized, as they watched a young couple standing before, between seconds, the sculpture of Vera transforming. The couple leaned into each other, clearly moved by the piece in ways they couldn't articulate. "That was always your gift," Vera replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Capturing moments between moments." They found Renata in her office later that day, surrounded by exhibition catalogs and press clippings about Liam's work. Her eyes were red from crying. "I wish I knew what happened to you," she whispered to an old photograph on her desk. Liam at his first successful exhibition years before, moved by her grief. Liam concentrated on the small sculpture of Vera's face that sat on Renata's bookshelf, a gift he'd given his agent before the exhibition. Under his focus, the marble briefly glowed with inner light. Renata's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she stared at the now normal sculpture. A smile of understanding slowly spread across her face. "You found what you were looking for, didn't you?" she said to the empty office. "You found your impossible moment." In that instant, Liam felt the barrier between worlds thin just slightly, allowing a single point of true connection. He placed his hand on Renata's shoulder, and though his touch remained incorporeal, she shivered as if feeling a ghost of sensation. "We'll need a keeper of our story," Vera murmured. "Someone to help others understand what they're feeling when they encounter your art."
At night.
As they stood on the lighthouse balcony, watching both sunset and the crystalline, celestial movements of Vera's world simultaneously, Liam realized that what they had achieved wasn't a limitation but liberation. They existed now as living inspirational love story that had become part of the creative consciousness of two worlds. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, watching the dual skies perform their impossible dance above them. "Giving up your world, your form, for this in-between existence?" Vera turned to him, her eyes reflecting stars from both realities. "We didn't give up anything. We gained everything. We are now part of every artist's moment of inspiration, every lover's perfect glance. Every second, when time seems to stand still." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers leaving trails of light against his skin. "Remember what you said? When I looked into your eyes that first day, the world stopped. Now we live in that suspension forever, watching both our worlds create beauty, inspired by moments that shouldn't be possible." As they embraced, their forms temporarily merged, sending ripples of creative energy outward in expanding waves. Across both dimensions, artists suddenly paused in their work, overcome with visions they couldn't explain but desperately needed to capture. In that moment, Liam understood the true meaning of transcendence. They had become more than individual beings. They were now the embodiment of that perfect instant. When creation and connection become one, when time holds its breath to witness something beautiful coming into being, "When she looked into my eyes," he whispered against Vera's lips, "eternity began." At around them, both worlds continued their separate rotations, unaware that in the space between them existed a pocket of perfect, understanding a love that had rewritten the very rules of reality itself. In galleries across both dimensions, visitors would forever stand before works of art that moved them in ways they couldn't explain, feeling echoes of a connection so powerful it had created its own universe, knowing they were experiencing fragments of Liam and Vera's endless moment, when time itself had surrendered to the power of their impossible love. The fall of Solari, the sun glinted off the crystal spires of Castle Solari, casting rainbow prisms across the training yard, where Commander Thorn Valerius moved with practiced precision. His blades sang through the air, each movement a testament to years of discipline. At 32, he had earned his position through merit rather than birthright, unlike many in the royal court. "You're favoring your right side again," came a melodic voice from the stone archway. Thorn lowered his sword, turning to face Princess Alara Solari. Her azure gown contrasted with auburn hair that caught the morning light. He bowed slightly, the formality undercut by the smile tugging at his lips. "Your Highness should be attending council, not critiquing my form," he replied. Alara stepped into the yard, her slippers silent on the stone. "The council speaks of nothing but marriage alliances. I'd rather discuss battle strategies." She picked up a training sword, her movements fluid despite the restrictive gown. "Besides, as my sworn shield, you should appreciate my concern for your technique." Thorn chuckled, circling her. Their relationship had always walked the line between protocol and friendship, delicate balance maintained since her father, King Darian, had appointed Thorn as her personal guard 5 years prior. "The Cordian delegation arrives tomorrow," he said, parrying her experimental strike. "Your father hopes their prince might catch your interest." "Prince Merrick is interested only in our southern harbors," Alara countered, her sword meeting his with unexpected force. "And I have no intention of becoming a political bargaining chip." Their practice continued, a dance they'd perfected over years of shared days. Neither mentioned the unspoken tension that had grown between them, feelings that duty and station forbade. That evening, the feast hall blazed with torchlight. Thorn stood at his post behind the princess, scanning the gathered nobility. Something felt wrong. The courtier envoys had arrived early, their expressions too practiced, their laughter too measured. When the goblets were raised for the king's toast, Thorn noticed the envoy leader's hand slip beneath his sleeve. Training took over. He lunged forward just as chaos erupted. Assassins. Someone screamed as crossbow bolts whistled through the air. King Darien fell first, a poison dart in his throat. Thorn grabbed Alara, pulling her behind a fallen table as guards clashed with disguised killers throughout the hall. "We need to reach the eastern passage," he hissed, blocking a sword thrust meant for her. Blood splashed across the marble floor, some his own. They fought their way through corridors, Alara proving her practice was not mere diversion. Outside the secret tunnel entrance, Lord Commander Rethelthorn's mentor blocked their path. His armor splashed crimson. "Rethel, thank the gods," Thorn began, then froze at the cold look in the older man's eyes. "I'm sorry, Thorn. Solari has grown weak. Cordis promised me the northern territories." Understanding dawned like ice water. "You betrayed us." "Give me the princess," Rethel demanded, raising his sword. "Run, Alara," Thorn whispered, pushing her toward the passage. "Find Marek at the western outpost. He'll protect you." "Thorn, no, go," he commanded, facing his former mentor. "I swore an oath." As Alara disappeared into the darkness, the two men circled each other, former teacher against student. "You could join us," Rethel offered. "They'll make you a lord." Thorn's answer was a lightning strike that Rethel barely deflected. The clash of their blades echoed through the burning castle as Solari fell around them. When Alara reached the outpost days later, she learned Castle Solari had burned to the ground. There were no survivors. The queen's burden 8 years passed like shadows across stone. The kingdom of Solari, once brought to its knees, rose again under Queen Alara's steady hand. She stood now on the castle balcony, watching autumn leaves dance across the newly rebuilt courtyard. The crystal spires had been replaced with stronger granite, less beautiful perhaps, but unbreakable. Like herself, she thought bitterly. "Your Majesty," came the respectful voice of advisor Lyria Thandal. "The ambassador from Valen awaits." Alara nodded, adjusting the silver circlet that now replaced the elaborate crowns of her father's reign. At 29, her face had lost its youthful softness, placed by a quiet dignity in the faint lines of someone who seldom smiled. "Another marriage proposal?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Prince Darien of Valen offers 5,000 troops to secure our northern border," Lyria confirmed. The council always feels," Alara interrupted, turning from the view. "Tell them I will consider it." The truth was, she had considered dozens of such proposals over the years. Each time, her mind returned to that night of fire and blood. 2 eyes gray as storm clouds and a voice commanding her to run while he stayed behind. The ghost of Commander Thorn Valerius haunted her still, making it impossible to contemplate another at her side. In the council chamber, talk turned quickly from marriage to more pressing matters. Lord General Kestone, a gruff veteran who had helped her reclaim the throne 3 years after the coup, pointed to markers on the war table. "Raiders have struck 3 villages near the Forgotten Forest. They leave no survivors, no banners," some peasants whisper of shadows that move like men. "Remnants of Cordian forces?" asked Lord Bennis, the elderly treasurer. "Perhaps," Keston replied, "though their tactics are ... unusual, they target our supply lines with precision that suggests intimate knowledge of our movements." Alara studied the map. "Increase patrols along the eastern roads, and send word to Marek at the western outpost. I want his assessment." Marek, the only other survivor of that night, who had sheltered her when she arrived bloodied and half-broken at his door, now her spy master, operating from the shadows, while officially commanding a remote garrison. Later that evening, as Alara retired to her chambers, her handmaiden Suri helped remove the formal regalia of court. "There are new stories in the city, Your Majesty," Suri said as she brushed Alara's auburn hair, now streaked with a single strand of silver. They speak of a guardian who watches over travelers near the forgotten forest. A tall figure who appears when danger threatens and vanishes just as quickly. People cling to comforting myths in troubled times, Alara replied. So something in the description made her heart quicken. The tavern keeper claims this guardian saved his daughter from raiders last moon. Says the man fought like a demon but spoke not a word. Bore a terrible scar across his face. Alara's fingers tightened on her goblet. Enough stories, Suri. Tomorrow brings early petitions. Lone in her bedchamber, sleep eluded the queen as it often did. She approached the locked chest near her bed, opening it with a key worn around her neck. Inside lay a broken sword, half a blade, its metal still showing traces of blood that would never wash away. She had found it clutched in Rethel's dead hand when she returned with her army to reclaim Solari. Of Thorn, they had found nothing but ashes. A sudden wind extinguished her candles, plunging the room into darkness. Alara reached for the dagger beneath her pillow, senses alert. "Show yourself," she commanded, her voice steady, despite the pounding of her heart. Silence answered, yet she felt a presence, a disturbance in the air like the moment before lightning strikes. When she relit the candle, her window stood open, curtains billowing. On her desk lay a small wooden carving of a hawk in flight, the exact image Thorn had once crafted for her 19th birthday, before duty forced him to maintain a commander's distance. Outside in the darkness, a figure watched from the shadows of a distant tower. The hood of his cloak concealed a face marked by a savage scar running from brow to jaw. Beneath the cloak, his hand reflexively touched the empty scabbard where half a sword should have rested. For 8 years, Thorn Valerius had been a ghost, protecting Solari's borders from threats the kingdom never knew existed. Tonight, he had come too close, risked too much. But rumors of assassins targeting the queen had drawn him back to these walls he'd sworn never to walk again. His oath remained unbroken, even if his body and spirit had been shattered and reforged in darkness and pain. As rain began to fall, he disappeared into the night, shadow among shadows, leaving no trace but the wooden hawk, a reminder and a warning. The queen was not as alone as she believed. Bonds unbroken, the battlefield stretched before them like a canvas painted in blood and valor. 3 days of fighting had left the northern plains scarred with the aftermath of war. Queen Alara stood on the command hill, her armor reflecting the setting sun as she watched Cordian forces retreat across the river. "They'll regroup by morning," General Keston said, his weathered face grim. "Prince Merrick still has reserves hidden in the eastern forest." Beside him, Commander Thorn Valerius studied the terrain with his single good eye. The past week had transformed him no longer a shadow, but a beacon that Solari's forces rallied around. Stories of his return had spread through the ranks, becoming legend with each telling. The scarred guardian who had returned from death to stand beside his queen was waiting for something, Thorn said, his voice carrying the authority that had once made him the youngest commander in Solari's history. "This retreat is too orderly." Alara nodded, trusting his instincts as she had since their reunion. "What would you advise?" "A night assault," he replied without hesitation. "Small force, targeting Merrick himself. Cut the head from the snake." Keston frowned. "The risk is necessary," Alara finished. "I'll lead it myself." Both men turned to her in alarm, but her expression brooked no argument. "This ends tonight." 8 years is long enough to live under Cordian threats. As twilight deepened into true darkness, 20 of Solari's finest warriors prepared for the mission. Alara, despite the protests of her council, donned lightweight armor that would allow her to move silently through enemy lines. The plan was simple, but dangerous: cross the river downstream, infiltrate the Cordian camp, and capture or kill Prince Merrick before he could launch his final assault. As they prepared to depart, Thorn found Alara alone in her tent, studying a map by candlelight. "You should remain here," he said without preamble. "Let me lead the assault." She looked up, a sad smile touching her lips. "Always the protector. Always your protector." He moved closer, lowering his voice though they were alone. "Solari needs its queen, and I need this ended." She set aside the map, rising to face him. 8 years ago, I ran while others fought my battle. Never again." Thorn's scarred face softened as he reached for her, pulling her gently against him. Then we go together, as it should have been from the beginning. Their kiss held the weight of possibility of a future beyond duty and shadows if they survived the night. When they parted, Ilara touched the half-sword at his hip, its broken blade a reminder of all that had been lost and found again. "Until the end," she whispered. "Beyond it," he answered. The night mission began well. They crossed the river under cover of darkness, dispatching sentries with silent efficiency. But as they neared the center of the Cordian camp, disaster struck. An alarm sounded, torches flared to life, and suddenly they faced hundreds of awakened enemy soldiers. "It's a trap," Thorn shouted, pushing Ilara behind him as arrows whistled through the air. "Fall back to the river." The retreat became a desperate fight for survival. Solari warriors formed a protective ring around their queen, cutting a path through the Cordian forces. Thorn fought like a man possessed, his broken sword claiming lives with each swing. His body a shield between danger and Ilara. They had almost reached the riverbank when Prince Merrick himself appeared, leading a dozen elite guards. Tall and cruel-faced, he resembled the father who had orchestrated the coup 8 years before. "The last of the Solari line," he called, eyes fixed on Ilara. "My father should have ended your bloodline when he had the chance." "Your father died a coward's death," Ilara replied, raising her sword. "As will you." What followed was a clash of skill and desperation. The remaining Solari warriors engaged Merrick's guards while Thorn and Ilara faced the prince himself. They fought as one, years of separation dissolving in the deadly rhythm of combat. Where Ilara's strike missed, Thorn's followed. When his defense faltered, her blade intercepted the threat. In the chaos, they became separated. Ilara found herself forced toward the rushing river by 2 of Merrick's guards. As she dispatched one, the other landed a blow that sent her stumbling backward. Perilously close to the steep bank, across the battlefield, Thorn saw her danger. Without hesitation, he abandoned his own fight, charging toward her with desperate speed. As Merrick's guard raised his blade for a killing blow, Thorn hurled himself forward, his broken sword piercing the man's back. The momentum carried them both over the edge. Ilara screamed as Thorn and the guard disappeared into the darkness below, the roar of the river swallowing her cry. No. Her anguish turned to fury as she turned to face Prince Merrick, who approached with confident steps. "History repeats," he taunted. "Another loyal dog sacrificed for the queen." Ilara's response was a whirlwind of steel and rage. Years of contained grief and renewed loss fueled each strike, driving Merrick back step by step until his confidence gave way to fear. When her blade finally found his heart, she leaned close to watch recognition fade from his eyes. "For Solari," she whispered. "For Thorn?" Dawn found her still searching the riverbank, refusing to abandon hope even as her generals urged retreat. The battle was won. Cordian forces had surrendered upon their prince's death, but Ilara felt only hollow victory. "Your Majesty," General Castone approached carefully. The scouts report movement in the southern bend. Hope flared briefly, then dimmed as she saw his expression. "Enemies?" "No." A strange smile crossed the old warrior's face. "A ghost who refuses to die." Ilara ran, heedless of dignity or protocol, following Keston's directions until she crested a small hill overlooking a sandy curve in the river. There, limping heavily and supported by 2 Solari scouts, was a battered figure whose identity she would know in any light. Thorn looked up as she approached, his good eye finding hers across the distance. His armor was gone, his body a canvas of fresh wounds atop old scars. But his lips curved into that rare smile she had rediscovered in their brief reunion. "You're late," she said when she reached him, her voice breaking despite her attempt at composure.
"Ow. Forgive me."
"My queen." He swayed slightly, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. The river had other plans. She dismissed the scouts with a gesture, taking their place at his side, her arm around his waist to support him. "Don't ever do that again." "Which part?" he asked, leaning gratefully against her. "Leave me." The words contained 8 years of absence and the fresh terror of nearly losing him again. Thorn stopped, turning to face her despite the pain it clearly caused. With deliberate movement, he knelt before her, drawing the broken sword from his belt. He offered it up, his gaze never leaving hers. "Never by choice," he vowed. "Not in this life or any other." Ilara took the sword, then reached down to raise him to his feet. "Not as your queen," she said softly. "No," he agreed, understanding her meaning. "As the woman I have loved since before I had the right to love you." As the sun rose fully over the battlefield, painting the world in light after the long darkness, they began the slow walk back to their waiting forces. The war was won, the kingdom secured, and in the space between duty and desire, between queen and guardian, they had found something unbreakable. That evening, as healers tended Thorn's wounds, Ilara addressed her council. Her decision was met with resistance that quickly faded under her unwavering resolve. A queen might be expected to make a political match, but this queen had rebuilt her kingdom from ashes. She had earned the right to choose her own path and the man who would walk it beside her. 3 months later, when Commander Thorn Valerius stood before the altar in the great temple, watching Ilara approach in silver and blue, the whispers of disapproval had long since given way to a new story spreading throughout the kingdom. Not of a queen and her guardian, but of two halves of a broken sword, reforged in fire and stronger at the joining. "Are you certain?" he asked quietly when she reached his side, his scars plain for all to see in the temple's bright light. Ilara took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "Some oaths cannot be broken," she said, echoing his words from the night of his return. "Even by duty." As they spoke their vows before the kingdom they had both sacrificed everything to protect. The legend of the Shadow Guardian gave way to a new truth that love, like loyalty, could survive even the darkest night to find its way home again.